Good morning. Today is Saturday, the 25th of June 2016, and we're making this video in support of the election petition that I lodged yesterday at the Royal Courts of Justice. Yesterday I went at 10:30 to the Queen's Bench to room E115, which is the office of Geraint Evans, who is the Royal Courts of Justice Elections Complaints Officer. He was in a meeting all morning, so basically I met with Julie, who works with him, and I gave Julie a green file and a DVD, and I gave her a copy of some documents that were in the file, with Mr. Evans already having got the documents later than the file since the 9th of June, as he's been emailed them. So I gave her the file and the DVD, and she took a copy of the documents within the file and she put a stamp on. The title of the file is "The Misuse of Psychiatrists to Cover Up for Avoidable Deaths and to Rig the Maidstone and Weald General Election Results, the London Borough of Sutton Results, and the Referendum. That is my election complaint." At the bottom, apart from listing the documents and it being sealed, it's got a red court seal on it. It's written 24th of 6, 2006, 10:30, Yolande Kenward brought this file to room E115 for the attention of Geraint Evans, RCJ Elections Complaint Officer, and a DVD of me speaking on the 18th of the 6th, 06 at the Maidstone Leisure Centre. So that's the summary of my complaint that has gone to Geraint Evans. On my way to his office, I picked up a sheet of listings for that day in the Queen's Bench division. I thought, oh, this is interesting. I wonder what's happening in the Queen's Bench today. I'd already noticed that downstairs in the reception that Master Basil Yoxall was due to be sitting this morning, and I had noticed that Master Simons was due to be sitting in the Cross Court, and I thought, oh, it's interesting, as they are both involved in the scandals that are part of my election complaint. Anyway, I sat down in the bear garden and looked at this, and it says room E109 before Master Yoxall, Friday 24th of June 2016 at 10:30. And then underneath it says not sitting. I thought, this is strange, he's not sitting. And I turn over the page and it says before Master Roberts, Friday the 24th of June at 10:30. And it lists 4 hearings that day. Bowden versus Mid Yorkshire Hospitals NHS Trust, Johnson versus Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells NHS Trust, Causa versus Pennine Acute Hospitals NHS Trust, and at 3:30 Haswell and Others versus Spire Healthcare Limited. Well, I was a bit surprised. I thought, what's happened to Master Basil Yoxall? Well, I found out that he'd been forced to resign the night before. I found out from talking to Deputy Master Henrietta Hill, QC, who was presiding over another case. And I spent 2 hours with her in the other case. So, it was very interesting to find out that somebody had done something about Master Basil Yoxall. And I'm wondering if there are other judges that have also gone because of what they did to cover up the scandals that I'm now about to talk about. Now, this is the presentation that I did at the Maidstone Leisure Centre on the 18th of June 2016 at 7:30 p.m. that was filmed by David Eden. And the title of the presentation is What Goes On in Maidstone. What was interesting was that actually after David had made the film, he went home and somebody hacked his computer, so, we lost 24 hours on getting the video out. But it is out there now, and I do have a copy of it, and the High Court too. So that's the title, What Goes On in Maidstone. Basically introduce myself. I am Yolande Kenward. I first came to Maidstone back in 1978, and I went on to become Kent Businesswoman of the Year in 1996. And one of the things that I felt at the time of becoming Kent Businesswoman of the Year was that if you have power, with power comes responsibility, and a responsibility to use that power constructively for the benefit of all. I progressed from there to show interest in children's matters. In the following up of the death of Princess Diana, I started doing humanitarian children work. When it came to 2000, I decided to combine two areas that I was interested in, patients and children and their protection, and I founded the Patient Support Trust in 2000. And the main aim of the Patient Support Trust was to reduce the risks for patients and for children. Unfortunately, due to what I uncovered and unearthed and what I was a witness to, the Patient Support Trust was destroyed along with almost every aspect of my life. And last Saturday's event was actually the relaunching of the Patient Support Trust. Again, with the main aims to reduce the risk for patients and for children. And we will be putting up a website in the next few days to help with that, the aim of what we intend to do. We'll start next with my medical accident at the BMI Summerfield Hospital and a 6.6 billion profit. Well, in early 2000, I went to my GP. I wanted to, I had a prolapse, and I wanted some advice. I wanted an expert opinion on what should happen next. And I was well aware that if you see a doctor privately, that helps you with the diagnosis, but then you can go back into the NHS. So I asked for a referral, and my GP, Dr. Godsmark, he referred me to Miss Anne Henderson at the BMI Summerfield Hospital. I had no intention at that stage of having a operation in a private hospital, but as a result of the consultation I had with her, I felt motivated to drop everything in my life and to agree to have an operation at the Summerfield on the 14th of February 2000. She managed to persuade me that I had cancer. As it turned out, I didn't. Anyway, it was a Monday morning, 14th of February. I remember it clearly. I went, she told me that basically the operation would only take 3 days, 3-day stay in the hospital, and then I would be off work for 2 weeks, and then I could be back running my business. So that's what I went for, to go in for the Monday the 14th and come out Wednesday evening the 16th. Well, her operating list was due to start at 2 o'clock that day. She was operating at the Maidstone Hospital that morning, and then she was coming straight from Maidstone Hospital to work on her list of 4 patients. I was having a hysterectomy. As it turned out, I was the 4th on the list, and therefore it was late in the afternoon when I was due to go into the theatre. Prior to the going into the theatre, I was visited by the anaesthetist, who tried to persuade me to have an epidural. And I said, absolutely not. I've got a thing about epidurals. I don't trust them. I don't want an epidural. I'll just have a general anaesthetic. So I went into the theatre late that afternoon, had my vaginal hysterectomy and came out, and things weren't right, and I felt very frightened, concerned about what had happened to me, because it appeared to me that I was having an adverse reaction to the anaesthetic. I was having breathing difficulties. For some reason I decided that what I wanted to do, or I had to do, was to stay awake all night, because in my head it was saying to me, if you go to sleep, I don't think you're going to wake up. So somehow I fought the anaesthesia, and I stayed awake, and it came to the middle of the night, and a nursing assistant came in the room, and I wanted to tell her how I was feeling, but I couldn't speak. So I couldn't tell her that I needed help, and what I now know is I had a TIA. In the morning I was still awake, absolutely exhausted, but wanting to know what had happened to me and why, and I couldn't get anybody to tell me why, and my surgeon was avoiding me. This went on, and in the end I had neck injuries. I don't know how I got neck injuries, but I had neck injuries. And at that stage, the business development manager of the Summerfield Hospital was on my Kent Business Network committee, and I chaired the Kent Business Network, and she was on that panel. And so she just said to me that basically what we're going to do is we're going to get somebody from the Retreat beauty centre across the road to come in and give you a neck massage. So that's what happened. In the meantime, I was so stressed out and traumatised by my experience in the operation, or after the operation. I was so traumatised that I contacted a friend of mine, Margaret Kenyon, who lived in Appledore, who was a Reiki practitioner. And basically I got her to come into the hospital that Thursday and to give me Reiki to de-stress me. And so basically I didn't get discharged on the Wednesday night as I was supposed to. I was still in there on the Thursday. And I'd paid for the operation using a BMI credit card, because I didn't have the money at that time to fund a private operation. So that was £3,500. On the Thursday, I decided I'd had enough of my surgeon avoiding me, not wanting to talk to me, not wanting to give me answers. So I spoke to the nursing assistant, and I said, I've had enough, Miss Henderson. I'm getting rid of her. And I've just phoned Dr. David Penman, who bought my old house off of me in Grove Green, and he's got visiting rights, and I want him to take over from Miss Henderson. So they said, yes, that's okay. I said, and I want nothing more to do with Miss Henderson. Well, the next thing that happened was a bit later on, the nurse came back and she said, Miss Henderson's lecturing over at Medway Maritime Hospital, but she's abandoning her lecturer and she's coming over to speak to you. I said, no, she isn't. I don't want to see her again. Well, she did. She appeared. Suddenly my bedroom door burst open a bit later, and there stands Miss Henderson in the doorway, shouting at me. And I'm lying there in my bed feeling really unwell, and she's shouting at me, and I thought, go away, you stupid woman. I'm going to ignore you. You keep shouting and then go away. And that's what she did. I never replied, and she went away. David Penman came in to see me the next day, and the Friday of that week, the 18th of February 2000, and took over my care from Miss Henderson. On the 19th of February 2000, I was discharged. When I was discharged, I was under the care of Mr. Penman. But who did my discharge note for my GP? Well, it was Miss Henderson. It was her that did my discharge note, and she sent it to my GP, Dr. Godsmark. And what did this discharge note say? Well, it effectively said, Yolande is mad. Wow. What it should have said was, Yolande's very traumatised by her experience in the BMI Summerfield Hospital. She is traumatised, she's at risk of developing PTSD. She acquired 2 infections in the hospital, one of which was MRSA. She has needle stick injury, she had whiplash injuries, and she had a TIA. But was that on the discharge record? No, it wasn't mentioned at all. Just Yolande is mad. So off that went to my GP, Dr. Godsmark. I went home feeling really, really ill and not knowing why I was feeling so ill. And things didn't get better at home. In fact, the Summerfield even came and visited me at my home. But they still didn't help me. And I was asking for my medical records. I wanted to know what was going on. But I still didn't get any answers. And in the meantime, I was having to pay other doctors to give me some answers as to what was going on. I got worse, and in the end, I went up to my surgery, and I collapsed in my surgery, and they called an ambulance. And they sent me into the Maidstone Hospital. Still nobody saying to me, you've got an open wound and MRSA. I get up to the casualty in an ambulance, and I'm in A&E, and I'm there with a friend of mine who was running Kent Business World. And at the other side of the curtain, I could hear Miss Henderson talking to an A&E nurse, talking about me being a mad woman. I thought, oh, okay. Anyway, I did get admitted into Maidstone Hospital, but I was put under the care of Dr. Goodman. But they did put me in a side room, and they did say they'd keep Miss Henderson away from me because I didn't want to have anything to do with her when she came on the ward. But should I really have been going into Maidstone Hospital with an open wound and MRSA? I really don't think so. Should I have been told that I had MRSA? Should I have been allowed to go into the Bupa Alexander with an open wound and MRSA to see Dr. Chong? Should I have been spreading it in my surgery? Should I have been wandering around the community with an open wound and MRSA? Anyway, I came out of the hospital and I thought, right, I'm going to use my management consultancy skills to find out what is going on. There's something going on here. I don't know what it is. I want answers to why I believe I nearly died in that hospital. I want to know what's going on. So I started researching. And I launched in the middle of 2000 a medical accident website to gather data on medical accidents around the world. And for 4 years, that medical accident website led the world in sharing data about rogue doctors, rogue medication, effectively setting things up for a class action against certain medication. And of course there was reprisals because people didn't want that website up there. But I also posted on there things like photographs of my needle stick injury in my back. I put that up there in September 2000 with the question, what is it? Because I didn't know what it was. Obviously it was MRSA. Well, when I came out of the Summerfield, I wanted my medical records. But could I get my medical records? I got some medical records from the Summerfield, but not very much. But I also wanted my NHS medical records. Now, you're supposed to be able to get your NHS medical records within 28 days. I asked, and I asked, and I asked. And it was to take me 18 months before I got my medical records. So I thought, there's something going on here. What is going on? And around that time, there was quite a lot in the media about medical scandals. There was the Shipman inquiry, the Shipman scandal that was around in the press at that time, and so was Dr. Rodney Ledward. So I thought, okay, seems like I'd like to know more about medical scandals. What is the mechanism that that keeps them covered up for so many years? I'm going to start looking into this. Well, 16 years down the line, I can tell you exactly what the mechanism is that keeps these medical scandals a scandal, because I realised by the bizarre behaviour I was witnessing from so many people in my own scandal that I was involved in a medical scandal. So I started to, as I said, research medical scandals, record what was going on, investigate. I was running Kent's leading health and safety business at the time, Lorem Health and Safety. I had access to the top health and safety advisors in the country. So I started looking at what was going on at the Summerfield from a health and safety point of view. I also had inside knowledge because my business had been training their safety advisors, so I was aware of where they were coming from in terms of health and safety. I also started looking at reports on the Summerfield as to what was going on in there. I then discovered that there were problems there that I should have known about before I went into that hospital. When I was lying in my hospital bed, I was well aware that they were short of cash and that they were trying to finance an extension at that time so that they could get more NHS contracts to take patients with MRSA from the NHS and look after them in the Summerfield. I also discovered that they didn't have proper sterilisation equipment at that time either. I mean, I know they do now, but back in 2000 they didn't have proper sterilisation equipment. Hence, I ended up with 2 infections, one of which was MRSA. So, what happened after that was that I started monitoring things to do with the BMI Summerfield Hospital, and I started looking at what was happening with the NHS, with the media, and with BMI in particular. And I noticed on the 1st of September 2000 that the BMI healthcare group was taken over by BC Partners on the 1st of September 2000. I also noticed that 5-6 years down the line, the BC Partners investment in the BMI healthcare group had actually made a 6.6 billion profit. Wow. This profit was reported as being Europe's largest ever profit. Well, how do we make Europe's largest ever profit? Well, that's a scandal, because I know how they made Europe's largest ever profit. And I know that profit and what Master Basil Yoxall did is the reason he's no longer a judge. So what happened next? So I'm fighting to get my medical records. I'm unwell. At that time, I was earning over 150,000 a year, and I knew I had PTSD. So, it was on its way. So, what did I do? I contacted John Pinchoff, who I'd known since the early 1980s. And I thought he was a trusted family friend. I knew he also worked as a psychologist up at the Summerfield, but I thought that our relationship was, was okay, or that he could help me as well as work for the Summerfield. Anyway, so I had some PTSD counselling, which I paid for him, but it wasn't very good counselling, and he gave me bad advice. So my PTSD actually got worse and not better. And when it came to the anniversary of the operation on the 14th of February 2001, I had PTSD flashbacks and a PTSD breakdown. Not good. It wasn't good at all. I was very distressed, and I was given advice, again by John Pinchoff. What was the advice he gave me? Well, that I should leave my kids for the first time in my life and go alone on holiday to Bermuda. and that was what I needed to recover. So that's what I did. I booked a 7-day flight to Bermuda. At the same time, my GP was also, offering me other help, but not help that was of any real value at the time. So anyway, I did what they told me to do, and I went to Bermuda. I thought, okay, I left my kids with some friends. I mean, they were teenagers at that time in 2000. My daughter was, about 14, 15 they were. But they were being looked after by friends, and I thought, right, I'll do what... No, they were older than that. 2001. 15, 16. So I went to Bermuda for my health, as advised by John Pinchoff, to get over this PTSD breakdown. Well, it was a lovely place in Bermuda. Sinesta Beach Hotel I went to. It was a 4-star hotel, and a lovely place. The people seemed very nice. There's only about 60,000 people there, but they seemed very nice. And what happened out there? Well, I observed out there, first of all, some very odd things. It looked to me like they had an over paedophile tourist trade involving Americans over there. And anyway, on the day I was due to leave, I got a taxi from the Sinesta Beach Hotel, a people carrier, and for some reason I decided that I wasn't going to sit in the back with my luggage. I was going to sit in the front of the people carrier with this chap. And as we're driving along, I talked about this bizarre thing that I had witnessed with these American tourists and this little boy. And anyway, what happened next is this man, this taxi driver, he didn't take me straight to the airport. He took me somewhere else, and he parked up, and he absolutely terrified me. How I got myself out of the situation I was in, I don't know, but basically he wanted me out of the car, and he wanted me on the beach, and I wouldn't get out of the car at all, and I did engage in a partial sexual. Sorry, it just upsets me, but for some reason I then decided to take a photograph of him, and after this sexual thing had happened, I managed to persuade him to take me to the airport. I got to the airport, and all I wanted to do was to get on the flight home. And I got home, and when I got home, I just got extremely distressed. I woke up the next morning, I got home, I got very, very, very distressed over what had happened to me in Bermuda. What went on from there was I spoke to Maidstone Police about what happened to me in Bermuda. It turned out that Kent Police have a contract with Bermuda Police. A lot of British police go and work in Bermuda, and a lot of them get trained at Kent Police headquarters. So I actually had somebody from the Bermuda Police come over to see me at my home, a little caring farm, with a woman from Maidstone CID. And because of the photograph I'd taken of the man, they were able to tell me where he'd taken me, and we knew his name too. And they said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to pursue this matter, and we're going to put him on trial in Bermuda. Meanwhile, I was speaking to the KM about this, and then I noticed some publicity about Bermuda, and I wrote a letter to the KM and the Daily Mail, warning tourists about what could happen to them in Bermuda. So what happened with that was the Daily Mail responded. Their letters editor, Andy Simpson, responded, and he sent a cameraman down to my farmhouse in Maidstone, and they took a photograph of me. And what happened next, on the 6th of April 2001, a photograph of me appeared in the Daily Mail. But my letter wasn't as I'd written about Michael Douglas and what had happened to me in Bermuda. It had been changed. And it had been changed to protect my assailant in Bermuda. The Daily Mail had committed sub judice. Why were they doing that? Anyway, the Daily Mail could be bought in Bermuda, and there's some lovely, very decent people in Bermuda. And they read this article, this letter about what had happened to me in Bermuda, and they thought, my God, what are they doing to our tourists? Our tourist trade is what we rely on. And there was a peaceful march out there by the decent people in Bermuda to stop what was happening to me, an innocent tourist, visiting their town, their country. So that's what was going on. But basically, what happened was I got re-traumatised. That complicated my PTSD claim against the Summerfield. So I had to have more rest to get over what had happened to me in Bermuda. Meanwhile, I'm still trying to sort out my medical accident, because what had happened was in December 2000, the BMI credit card side of BMI Healthcare had issued legal proceedings against me. So in December 2000, they'd issued in the Croydon County Court CR005200. That was BMI card against myself. But basically, because I lived in Maidstone, and the case was transferred to the Maidstone County Court. So I thought, okay, great. What I'll do is I'll counterclaim for my injuries and my PTSD, my loss of earnings. I'll counterclaim. But and then I started to see odd things going on down the Maidstone County Court. I thought, why are people mucking about with this case? And in the end, the case did get listed for July 2001. But I still needed medical evidence to support my claim. And I found doctors closing ranks right across the country. I did get a Professor Reynolds to do a report, which I paid her for, but all he did was cover up for what was going on in the hospital. I only found two people, one in this country, Dr. Jeff Roberts, and one in Switzerland, Dr. Dominic Schwander of the World Health Organization, that were willing to give me any help whatsoever, because nobody else would. And so that was the situation I was in. Basically, once I'd launched my medical accident website in 2000, I had been approached by Dr. Jeff Roberts, who was very high up in risk management at the Medical Defence Union. And he was quite concerned about what was going on in this country, and he approached me in May, June 2000 about us teaming up to do pilot projects to restore patients' confidence in the light of the Shipman scandal and Kent's own Dr. Rodney Ledwood scandal, plus there were other scandals going around Kent too. So that's what we thought we'd do. And I was quite concerned for women in Maidstone that their safety was at risk because of what I'd uncovered was going on in the Summerfield, because there wasn't even a doctor on duty that night. And I was there, and there were 12 patients who were being looked after by a single nurse. So what I did was I contacted the media, and back in June 2000 I contacted ITV Meridian, and somebody recommended to me that what I do is I contacted Dr. Paul Hobday, who was the BMA rep in Maidstone at that time. So that's what we agreed, that ITV Meridian would meet me outside Dr. Hobday's surgery in Sutton Valence and film me. So they filmed me outside his surgery in Sutton Valence. Then they filmed me inside his surgery room, in his practice room. There was myself sitting down with Dr. Paul Hobday, either side of a table with a camera crew in his room too. We spoke about Dr. Jeff Roberts' project to restore the confidence of patients in Maidstone via a pilot project done between myself, Dr. Paul Hobday, Dr. Jeff Roberts and myself. And it was agreed on camera that we would have this pilot project. So the next thing that happened was ITV Meridian showed what had been going on outside and inside Dr. Paul Hobday's surgery. But what they didn't broadcast was the sound between myself and Dr. Hobday as to what we were agreeing. The next thing that happened was that I saw Dr. Hobday in the Kent Messenger. I thought he was telling people in Maidstone not to trust me, and that patients in Maidstone should trust their doctor, and there is no need for the sort of project that I was talking about. And I thought, oh, most odd. And then there was also a photograph of Edwin Borman, owner of the Kent Messenger Group, cutting a cake down at the Summerfield Hospital in celebration of the new extension that had been built down there. So I thought, this is interesting. Anyway, that was going on in 2000, and then my medical accident website, that was being sabotaged. I thought, what's going on here? And then move forward again to 2001. I've got my medical accident case. I've got a claim coming up. My claim is worth at least $500,000. But what happens? I can't get my medical records. So what happens next? Well, we've got a hearing fixed for the 24th of July 2001. No medical records, and this is what, nearly 18 months from when I've had my medical accident. And it's only listed for half an hour. I thought, half an hour to sort out my medical claim and my $500,000 compensation package? I thought, something's odd going on around here. I had no real experience of the courts for years. I'd always believed that when you go to court, you have a judge who is wise and experienced that dispenses justice. So I was hoping and expecting that that would be the case when I went down to the Maidstone County Court on the 24th of July 2001. But because I'd seen some odd things going on, I was a bit suspicious, so I took with me a reporter, Craig Tucker, and I also took my PA at that time, Pat Shanahan, who's now a social worker. We got down there with my file. I was a litigant in person. I had recruited a solicitor in the early stages of my claim when I put my counterclaim in, and I'd gone to a female solicitor working at Furley Page in Canterbury. But when I found out that all she was doing was undermining my case and not helping me, and I was paying her to do what she was doing, I said, enough is enough, I'm going to do this myself. So, some 3 months before the hearing in July, I got rid of her. Anyway, I got down to the Maidstone County Court with Craig and Pat. And what happened next? Well, the BMI solicitors in Croydon, ladies solicitors in Croydon, had appointed a lady barrister. And a lady barrister was there at the court. and she was in one of the little meeting rooms. But who turned up next? Well, it was the solicitor that I'd sacked 3 months earlier from Furley Page. What was she doing there? Well, what happened next was she filed into my hearing basically that I'm mad, and she went in to meet with the BMI barrister and had a consultation with her in secret. Then she came out of there, and I thought, I wonder what she's going to do next. So I followed her. Where did she go? She went into the judge's chambers. What was my former solicitor doing? Speaking to the judge before the hearing. Well, the next thing is we're called into this 30-minute hearing. Who goes in? Well, Craig Tucker's not allowed in, and Pat's not allowed in either. So I have to go in alone with my files. Who is in there? Well, there's Judge Linda Burgess sitting on the bench. There's also the female BMI barrister, and there is this Furley Page solicitor. Why she's in there, I object, but she's in there. So there we are, women only in this hearing. Fairly quickly into the hearing, I say to the judge, I've just had a letter from the practice manager at the Bearsted Medical Practice saying that my medical records, they have sent in part to my solicitors. And I went up to Bearsted Medical Practice and said, I've never given you any authority to do that. I don't have any solicitors. Which solicitors have you sent them to? Well, they didn't tell me. So when I got into the court hearing, I said to the judge, what is going on with my medical records? I can't get my medical records. I need my medical records for this claim. We can't have this as a final hearing because I need my medical records. I said, who's got my medical records? Which firm of solicitors has got my medical records? And she said to me, Furley Page. I thought, oh, she obviously has been briefed by this Furley Page solicitor that they have my medical records. So I thought, So the hearing progressed in this way, and then what the judge said to me next has taken me down a different route to where I am now. The judge then smiled at me from where she was sitting on that elevated bench and said to me, if we want you to lose, you will lose. I thought, my God, how outrageous. This judge is actually saying this to me. If we want you to lose, you will lose. And smiling at me. Anyway, our short hearing ended. I came out of there, I was so angry. I went round to the counter for the admin counter of the Maidstone County Court. And I said, I want a copy of the transcript of that hearing. And what did they say to me? Oh, the judge didn't record the hearing. Oh, the judge didn't record the hearing. But the judge was as good as her word, over my counterclaim, my $500,000 counterclaim. What does she do? If we want you to lose, you will lose. What does she do next? She personally pursued me into the Maidstone Bankruptcy Court. And what did BMI do over my disputed £5,000 debt? £3,500 for the first 3 days, and then they charged me £1,500 for the extra 2 days that I had to be in there because of their injuries. So over this disputed £5,000 debt, what did this judge do? Well, yes, I ended up in the bankruptcy court over this disputed debt. They seized both of my properties. Both? Why did they need both of my properties? They seized my office block up at Lordswood and my 6-bedroom farmhouse over this disputed debt. So, yes, I did end up in the bankruptcy court. So I thought, I need some bankruptcy advice. So where did I go? I went to Whitehead Monkton solicitors. They were my former solicitors back in 1978 to 80. So I thought, okay, I'll go back there. I went to see their bankruptcy expert. I had my file. And I showed him my file. And he gave me bankruptcy advice, and I paid for bankruptcy advice. And so I thought, okay. But what happened after that was I was still looking into what was going on in Maidstone with injustice, miscarriages of injustice and things like that. I just wanted to know what was going on because something seemed so odd about what was going on in the Maidstone County Court. So I came across a group called Kent Against Injustice that was meeting in Maidstone. This group was founded by 4 families in Kent, all of whom alleged that their loved ones had been framed for murders they hadn't committed. And one of the families that I remember was the family of Michael Stone, Barbara Stone's sister and mother, who were part of the founding 4 of that Kent Against Injustice. Anyway, I went along to one of their meetings, and while I was at the meeting, I met somebody, Peter Hayward, a prominent businessman from Tunbridge. And Peter was a lovely man, 2 daughters, one working for, I think, United Nations, and the other one working in a bank. And he was there because of what was happening to his daughter that worked in a bank. She was due to go on trial over a fake trial, so he was there at the Kent Against Injustice meeting. So I sat next to Peter Hayward, and we exchanged details, and then we met up after this Kent Against Injustice meeting. Peter, at that time, was coordinating the Litigants in Person Society, a group of more than 100 people, largely businessmen, all around the UK, who are all fake bankruptcy victims. They'd been bounced into a court anywhere around the country over a disputed debt, and then suddenly found themselves bankrupt and asset stripped, including, as it turned out, a guy in London called Ebert, a very wealthy Jewish businessman who I got to know as well. Also attached to that group, there were 3 decent Freemasons connected to that group who had been made maliciously bankrupt. Why had they been made maliciously bankrupt? Well, they had been trying to help the Duke of Kent out with his Royal Masonic Hospital robbery fraud. I mean, there had been a situation whereby it was decided that there should be a vote amongst Freemasons as to whether the Royal Masonic Hospital should be saved or it should be sold. There were people who thought it should be saved, including a decent Freemason in Canterbury called Malcolm Denyer, who he told me he was very vociferous about it could be turned round because he was an accountant and he knew it could be turned round. Anyway, 3 of these good brethren who were trying to help the Duke of Kent found themselves maliciously bankrupt. And who was it that made them maliciously bankrupt? Well, apparently Lord Newburgh. And Malcolm Denyer too, an accountant and a decent Freemason, he also found himself bankrupt in the Maidstone County Court because of him being a whistleblower. But Malcolm and I got together and we started exchanging information, sharing information about people who'd been bringing down his business in Snodland, and we found that it was the same group of people that were involved in doing this. And anyway, myself, Peter Hayward and Malcolm Denyer did get together. And Peter Hayward did give me some very good bankruptcy advice. And what happened was my bankruptcy case got sent up to the Royal Courts of Justice Bankruptcy Court, and Peter Hayward came with me as a litigant, as a Mackenzie friend, and the advice that he gave me actually stopped me being made bankrupt. And but I still had to pay the £5,000 disputed debt. So that's how I got out of my bankruptcy, with the help of Peter Hayward, because Whitehead Monkton were clearly not working in my interest, as were Furley Page in Canterbury. So I got out of my bankruptcy. I paid my £5,000 with my Lorem Health and Safety business cheque, because I had no other money at that stage. But that's what I had to do in order to save everything that I'd ever worked for. So I didn't lose my properties at that stage, but I came to find out that if we want you to lose, you will lose, is actually the attitude of the Maidstone police and the Maidstone courts. Because I was so concerned at what I had unearthed about what was going on in the Summerfield, I didn't only go on BBC Radio Kent and ITV Meridian and in the newspaper. I also tried to go to Maidstone Police Station to get a crime reference and get them to investigate what was going on down there in the Summerfield, but they didn't want to give me a crime reference. They were adamant that no matter who I was, Kent Businesswoman of the Year, I was heading up Kent's most successful health and safety business, I was chairing the Kent Business Network. They were absolutely adamant that they weren't going to give me a crime reference. So in the end, I went over in 2001 to the Rochester Police Assault Clinic, and via them I did get a crime reference in Maidstone. CZ 853301. But was there a proper police investigation? No, there wasn't. They weren't interested. And I had no idea that police behaved the way that they behaved until I tried to report to them my serious patient safety concerns as to what was going on in the Summerfield. Wow. Police harass you. Police harassment at my home, aggression, abuse, threats. My God, it was horrendous. I couldn't believe it. I'd never heard about this in the newspapers. I didn't know in the newspapers from the Kent Messenger what goes on down the Maidstone County Court. I didn't know what our police get up to. I had no idea. Well, after I came out of that 30-minute hearing, I felt the need for justice. And that 30-minute hearing in Maidstone County Court, the one where the judge said, if we want you to lose, you will lose. Anyway, shortly after that hearing, I was allowed access to my medical records in August 2001. So 18 months down the line, when the law says I'm entitled to have my medical records in 28 days, I get them in 18 months in August 2001. By that time, I'm curious, because I'm thinking, my surgery wrote me a letter saying that my medical records have been sent in part to my former solicitors. Which part? So I sat down in 2001 to read my medical records for the first time. I'd never seen my medical records before. I had no idea what was in them. But I went back to 1980 and I thought, hang on, in the 80s, there's some strange things here. There's some reports from a Dr. Sherry in 1982 and 1988. And I thought, who is this Dr. Sherry? I've never seen a Dr. Sherry. And he was a psychiatrist. And I started crying when I read what Dr. Sherry had written. Because effectively, he was undermining me, not only as a victim of rape, but a witness to rape. Why was he doing that? Who was this Dr. Sherry? Anyway, I decided to find out who this Dr. Sherry was, and I went down to St Faith Street Library in Maidstone, and they had a directory in there of all doctors. And I found this Dr. Colin Sherry at an address near Ashford. So I thought, right, I'm going to write to him and ask him for an explanation. So I wrote to him and asked him for an explanation as to what was going on, why he'd created these fake medical records. As a psychiatrist, what was he doing? But he never replied. I also wrote to another doctor who I found was working at St Mary's Hospital and asked him what was he doing in my operation, because I hadn't consented for him to be there, but he didn't reply either. I did find out down the line that even though I had not consented to an epidural, that I'd actually been given an epidural during my operation on the 14th of February, and that my breathing problems and whatever afterwards were to do with mismanagement of this epidural. And I did find out that the reason that they were giving epidurals routinely when they had 12 patients post-operative at the same time as me was to minimise the cost of staff. They didn't have to have so many nurses on, and they didn't need a doctor there because we were all asleep. We had an epidural. So my breathing difficulties were actually to do with mismanagement of the epidural. But looking at my medical records sent me down a different route. I thought, why is somebody going to all the lengths to cover up, to put 2 fake reports in my medical records? So that sent me down a different route. I started investigating what was going on in 1980, 1982, as to why people would feel the need to do that. And that took me back to my ex-husband, Nigel Anthony Peck, and the crimes he committed against me in 1980, and crimes I believe that he committed against 2 other women in 1980, and crimes that he committed against me involving a Kent Messenger reporter and a priest that should have seen them both going on trial for up to 14 years in prison. So that took me down that route. I'll come back to that later. But that was quite an eye-opener to me, looking at those medical records. Anyway, going back to my medical accident, I thought, hang on, I've got some odd things in my medical records. What's going on in my police records? So I wrote to Kent Police and I said, I want a copy of all my Kent Police records. And that came back full of garbage too. I thought, what's going on? And at that time I knew about 20 serving Kent police officers, because a lot of them were being trained with me by my business up at Lordswood. So yeah, I thought, I'm going to go through these police records and I'm going to correct them. So I spent some time correcting them, and then I sent out the Kent police version and my version to these 20 police officers saying, and they started ringing up Kent Police Headquarters saying, what's going on? Why has she got these fake police records? Anyway, we never really got very far at that stage. And I've got no doubt that both my medical records and police records since then are now complete and utter garbage because of what was going on at that time. Anyway, I still... When you're a medical accident victim, I got to know lots of medical accident victims because of my website and my charity, the Patient Support Trust. There is a need within you as part of the healing process to get justice. But I found out, really, that basically, despite what the media says about it being a compensation culture, it's far from that. It's just the media telling us that to cover up for what's really going on. And in reality, 99.9% of people don't get compensation for medical accidents. There is a mechanism in place to make sure you don't get compensation. But yes, you do get the odd case where they do get a lot of compensation. And that receives a lot of publicity in the newspaper to try and persuade people, oh my God, there's a compensation culture. Well, I can do a direct comparison between my situation and Leslie Ash. Leslie Ash, the actress, I'd met when she and Jill Gascoigne came to my house in Grove Green to film an episode of Cat's Eyes on my birthday. So I'd met Leslie Ash, and so I was quite interested to read in 2008 that Leslie Ash had had a similar experience to me and was a high earning person such as myself, and that she actually got, I saw it reported in the Daily Mail, £5 million compensation. So basically, she got 5 million. What did I get? Well, I ended up having to pay them for what they did to me, and I ended up losing both my properties. So, and I lost my business, my income, everything. So my medical accident in 2000 has cost me about 2 million, but that was in a private hospital. So yes, it cost me 2 million, but what did Leslie Ash get? Well, her medical accident, similar to mine, was in an NHS hospital. So what did she get? She got 5 million with positive publicity in the Daily Mail. But what did I get? 2 million, a criminal record, and slagged off in the Kent Messenger, which is part owned by the Daily Mail. Do you think that's fair? That there is a mechanism in place so that private hospital patients don't get compensated to help boost the profits of the BMI group, and that NHS patients selectively, the NHS Litigation Authority pays out? It doesn't seem fair to me that that is the situation. So there's a differential there of something like about 7 million. So basically I would never ever go into a private hospital ever again because of my experiences, and I would not want anybody to go through what I've gone through. What happened next? Well, back in 2004, I had been trying, you will recall, back in 2000, 2001, 2002, to prevent any other woman suffering as I did from mismanagement of epidural. And what happened in 2004? A Maidstone woman who lived in Yeoman's Lane in Bearsted, opposite the Bearsted Medical Practice, she died, unfortunately. Mrs. Eledwin Domain, she died. She died avoidably of exactly what I warned was likely to happen in the Summerfield, mismanagement of epidural. She got transferred to the Maidstone Hospital from the Summerfield to die in the Maidstone Hospital. So that's a bit of a problem, really, because her death was avoidable. And meantime, they're making lots and lots of money out of the BMI group, and they don't want this avoidable death on their hands, because that BMI Summerfield could be seized under the Proceeds of Crime Act, and they don't want that, do they? So that's a problem. So what do they do in Maidstone? Well, they blame the whistleblower, because we've got judges, police, and Widdicombe, the Summerfield, all those, the KM, all those in trouble because of this avoidable death, because they're all helping the Summerfield. So who's the only person that's likely to speak out? Me. So we have a problem. But before we get to this 2004 situation, I'm still trying to get justice, which is what medical accident victims want. They want justice and they want answers so they can be healed from their medical scandal. So I'm still battling in the Maidstone court, trying to get justice. So I end up getting paying for 12 witness summonses to get people to come to court, these doctors and whatever in my scandal, to give witness evidence. Well, that goes to District Judge Edwina Millward. What does she do? She transfers these 12 witness summonses to the Royal Courts of Justice Queen's Bench, where there's already an action that I've started in the Queen's Bench. And both these actions are allocated to Master Basil Yoxall, the judge that deals with all the NHS and the private healthcare damages cases. So he's already got one case up there in the Queen's Bench, because I was so fed up with the harassment that was going on in Kent and what was going on in all directions, that I started a group action against 26 individuals and businesses, including the Maidstone County Court, because they were all colluding and giving me hell because of this Summerfield situation. So anyway, what District Judge Millward did was transfer these 12 witness summonses to Master Basil Yoxall in the Queen's Bench to be heard jointly with my case about these 26 defendants harassing me. Anyway, he put the two together, and although Judge Millward recommended half a day to hear the witness evidence, to this day, and this is 14 years down the line, and I've paid for these witness summonses, none of these witnesses have ever given evidence to Master Basil Yoxall. But what happened in that hearing in his room? Well, he protected all of those that were harassing me, never listened to the witness evidence, or never wanted to listen to the witness evidence, and basically he supported the lead. One of the defendants was Dr. Jonathan Goodman of the BMI Summerfield Hospital, and Dr. Goodman took the lead in protecting all the rest. So basically, what did I have to do? I had to compensate Dr. Jonathan Goodman, who was Anne Henderson's boss, and who I'd found out had been intimidating Dr. Penman at the time I was in the Summerfield Hospital. So that's what happened to that case, and that's how one of the reasons that BMI were able to make a 6.6 billion profit. Over the years, I watched what was going on in the media. I watched it very carefully, and there were no stories about MRSA coming out of a private hospital. There were plenty of stories about MRSA coming out of the NHS. And I thought, that's quite interesting that it only comes out of the NHS. But I was still persisting for justice 55 months after my medical scandal. So at that stage, I wrote to Rose Gibb, who was CEO of the Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells NHS Trust. I wrote to her. I wanted my hospital medical records. And she clearly wasn't involved in any sort of cover-up, because what did she do? She sent me my medical records, which included evidence that I had caught MRSA 55 months earlier. For 55 months, people have been keeping a secret from me that I'd caught MRSA, and I'd been taking it around the community and spreading it into the NHS and into other competitive private hospitals. Wow. Once I got that news, I was horrified. And I noticed that ITV was broadcasting on the 6 o'clock news that day about MRSA and the NHS. I thought, I've had enough of this. And so what I did, I faxed ITV, their out of hours national line, and I said to them, I reminded Stuart Rumble and co. that what had happened to me, and that MRSA, I just found out, was not only coming out of the Summerfield Hospital, the NHS, but it was coming out the Summerfield Hospital too. Well, a miracle happened. From their broadcast at 6 p.m. that day, where they were slagging off the NHS for having MRSA, to the 10 o'clock, by the time I'd sent my fax in, wow, no mention of MRSA coming out of anywhere after that. So a lot of people knew what was going on in this country. A lot of people knew what was going on with MRSA. The media certainly knew. Who else knew? Well, you only have to look at who are the BC partners, investors. They were syndicates. And I'm sure that all those syndicates were protecting their interests and helping them to make a 6.6 billion profit. And by the way that the media were behaving, they must have been involved in making that 6.6 billion profit to actively be deceiving the public as to what was going on in this country with MRSA. And it wasn't just coming out of the NHS, it was coming out of the Summerfield. So what happened from there? Well, we started to have problems with C. difficile in Maidstone. So that was going on. But my belief is that all 90 of those C. difficile deaths were avoidable. Because if all those people had been doing their jobs back in 2000, 2001, 2, 3 and 4, when I've been trying to get them to do their jobs, then none of those 90 patients would have died. And those people need answers as to why their loved ones died. And I believe that I've got the answers, and that this video, this film that we're making, will give them the answers as to why their loved ones died avoidably. People weren't doing their jobs. They were doing favours. And they were making money. And what happened after the end of those avoidable 90 deaths? What happened next? Well, the NHS got fined 3.5 million. Well, I think that's morally wrong. I don't think the NHS should have been fined 3.5 million for those avoidable deaths. I think that the Summerfield should have had some blame for that, and all the other people involved in the cover-up of the earlier death. Well, let's go back to the death of Mrs. Yolande Kenward. I've got in my election complaint a copy of a KM article about her avoidable death. Well, they held an inquest in July 2005. An inquest at KCC County Hall into the avoidable death of Mrs. Yolande Kenward. So I thought, right, I'm going to go down there to this inquest on the 15th of July 2005. But I didn't get to the inquest. Why didn't I get to the inquest? Because a Kent Messenger reporter in the Maidstone town centre set off a bomb scare. And that gridlocked the town, so people couldn't get there. I couldn't get there. But equally, what was going on at my isolated farmhouse? Well, I had bailiffs from the Maidstone County Court harassing me at my home, so I couldn't even get out. So that's how I didn't get to the inquest. And the inquest, therefore, didn't come out with a result it should have come out. But shortly after that, I got driven out of Maidstone. My properties were both avoidably repossessed, and they got what they wanted, what the judge said she wanted. If we want you to lose, you will lose. And both my properties were avoidably repossessed. Well, so my interest in law suddenly started because of this medical accident, and my realisation that solicitors couldn't be trusted. And I spent years in and out of the courts trying to get justice, and I found a lot of problems getting justice. And then I started to use my experience to help others, and I became what they call a Mackenzie friend. That is somebody who isn't a solicitor but helps somebody with their court papers and in court. And that's what I decided to do. And because of my experience of the courts, I decided that where the most evil is being done via our courts with their "if we want you to lose, you will lose" is in the family courts, I decided to specialise in children's cases. And so I spent many years working on children's cases until I got to a particular case in July last year. And the case involved the London Borough of Sutton, which is the subject of my second election complaint about vote rigging. And the person that I was helping was Desmond Tutu's grandson. And basically what had happened, Desmond Tutu's grandson was spending a few days holiday with relatives in London in May last year, and he ended up in care via the London Borough of Sutton, even though he didn't have a British passport, he didn't want asylum, but he ended up in care. And he wasn't allowed to go to his home in Zimbabwe with his mother, he just had to stay in care. And due to his horrific experiences in care, including his drink being spiked and then being stabbed, and him getting PTSD and it wasn't treated, and then him getting sectioned to cover up for the breach of duty of care by the London Borough of Sutton, the whole thing was absolutely disgusting. He got sectioned on the 4th of February this year, Desmond Tutu's grandson, on the directions of the director of Children's Services at the London Borough of Sutton. What had happened prior to this was that the London Borough of Sutton knew they were in difficulty, so they'd got a reporting restriction order preventing the press from reporting what had been going on in this case. So what happened was that I got involved in the case last July, became very, very close with the mother, who was an international businesswoman, who is a global employee, got a PhD, Dr. Goromonzi, and we worked together very well. And because of my knowledge of the legal system and the court system and how it works here and how solicitors work, I was able to use my experience of what goes on in scandals to help her. And by the time I started helping her, I think she just about sacked her second firm of solicitors for undermining her case and not helping her. And then in the end, she had 4 firms of solicitors, all of which she sacked, all of them, because they were undermining her case. And there were also very high-profile barristers involved in the same scenario, and we've got separate videos. I've got separate videos that detail all of that. Well, I'm currently trying to get into the Supreme Court to lift that reporting restriction order. I've been trying to do it for months, and that happened after John Hemming went on to Good Morning Breakfast and started linking the Desmond Tutu scandal to the PJS scandal injunction that was at that time being decided in the Supreme Court. So I pushed this one into the Supreme Court. But the reason I can't get any further with the Supreme Court and get this injunction lifted so that the media can report the scandal is that you need a certificate of the High Court before I can put an appeal in to the Supreme Court. And so when I was at the Royal Courts of Justice yesterday, I thought I'm going to find out where and who can give me the certificate of the High Court, because I've got two actions. I've got Juliana Kennedy's fake adoption of her son and her avoidable separation of her two children via fake psychiatric reports. I need to get that case in, and I need to get the London Borough of Sutton case in, because it's a vote rigging scandal. Because if the voters in Sutton and the people in this country knew what was going on in the London Borough of Sutton, they would be horrified, and it would be a vote losing scandal. Well, yesterday when I was in the Royal Courts of Justice Queen's Bench, and I was with Deputy Master Henrietta Hill, QC, I asked her, where can I get a certificate of the High Court in the Royal Courts of Justice? And she didn't know. So I'm going to have to go back on Monday to Robert Greenberg, the senior case manager at the Supreme Court, and say, well, if a High Court judge doesn't know where I can get the certificate, you're going to have to tell me. But basically, the referendum shouldn't have taken place, with my election petition unresolved against Helen Grant coming out, and the reporting, the injunction that Anne Widdecombe got against me to rig that election, and referendum shouldn't have gone ahead without the voters knowing what I know, that I spoke about last Saturday at the Maidstone Leisure Centre, and what I know about was going on in the London Borough of Sutton, that they've got a vote rigging injunction. I believe that the injunction is void, because I don't think there was ever any legal basis for the order, but they won't give me confirmation in the Supreme Court. But I do believe that that order is void, and therefore I'm quite legitimate in talking about that scandal, even though the media only just started to refer to it. I saw an article in the Daily Mail on Thursday whereby Mr. Justice Holman, who was the only clean judge in that scandal, was making indirect references to it in the Supreme Court by linking it to the PJS case. And so I believe that I'm actually right, that the order was void, and that people need to know just how much money was wasted in the London Borough of Sutton to keep that boy in care avoidably for a year, and what he went through. I believe it's in the public interest, and that the voters should have known about that before the referendum. So that's where I'm coming from with the London Borough of Sutton. The injunction is a vote rigging injunction. The voters have a right to know how public money is being wasted, and how a child of 15 went through absolute hell, including being sectioned and sent to a secure unit, where he suffered even more hell and didn't even get treated for his PTSD there, but got a fake diagnosis of schizophrenia to cover up for the compensation claim that he had for his stabbing, the avoidable PTSD, etc. It is disgusting what happened to that poor boy. And just look at the video that I made, the presentation I did at the Children Screaming to Be Heard conference on the 16th of April this year, when I detail what was badly wrong in that case, and how the public have the right and need to know what went on. I'm now going to jump on to section 12 of the presentation that I did at the Maidstone Leisure Centre last week. And this section is called The Use of Injunctions and Sectioning. And what I'm saying is that injunctions and sectioning have been used to rig elections in both Maidstone and in the London Borough of Sutton. When I'm talking about Maidstone, I'm talking about elections that I wanted to take part in. Basically, for 11 years, I've been wanting to stand as a prospective parliamentary candidate in Maidstone. And what happened to me was after what happened in 2005, on the 20th of August 2007, I travelled down from Carlisle, where I was living, down to the Royal Courts of Justice, and I went to meet with the Royal Courts of Justice Elections Complaint Officer at that time, Helene Newman. And I said to Helene, I explained that I'd been stopped for standing before. I wanted to put steps in place to make sure I could stand as a prospective parliamentary candidate in Maidstone and Weald in 2010. So I gave her a background of what was going on and why it was going on. And the advice that Helene Newman gave me was to start an action in the Queen's Bench that day. So I did exactly what the Elections Complaint Officer did, and I started an action, a defamation action, in the Queen's Bench against Anne Widdecombe MP and the Carlisle News and Star. Well, what happened next? It finally had a hearing on the 2nd of May 2008. I never actually made the hearing because I was unwell. But far from getting my defamation claim sorted and being allowed to stand, an injunction plus a penal notice threatening me with prison was placed on me for 2 years, and to make sure that I couldn't get all the resources together and to be able to stand against Helen Grant in 2010. By that time, I knew that the selection of somebody to replace Anne Widdecombe was being rigged, because where I was I was driven out of Maidstone by Anne Widdecombe and threatening to section me, and I ended up in Cumbria. And after I got up there in January 2006, she came up on the 1st of April 2006 on the guise of going to the Brampton Cottage Hospital to save it. But 6 months later, I was told, because Carlisle's a very gossipy place, and I was very friendly with the newsagent in the town centre, and he told me that a lady from Brampton, the former Carlisle mayor, Judith Patterson, had been offered the safe Conservative seat of Maidstone. So what did I do? Yeah, I thought, right, I need to sort this out. And I thought, I'm going to get a message to the Maidstone Conservatives, because this Judith Patterson, I was told, was one of David Cameron's A-list candidates. So she was virtually guaranteed a seat somewhere. So on the 10th of October 2006, I sent a suspicious activity report by fax to the lead Maidstone Crown Court judge, Andrew Patience. Now, I shouldn't have been able to know that sending him a fax would go straight to the Conservatives, but it did, because Judith Patterson did not become Anne Widdecombe's successor at all. She, and if you do a Google search of her, you can barely find any mention of her, because it's all been wiped clean. Plus all the stuff that Anne Widdecombe was defaming me about in the Carlisle News and Star has also disappeared, that I'd discussed with Helene Newman, like Anne Widdecombe having FTAC at New Scotland Yard monitoring my communications, which was defamatory. Anyway, so that was a situation I already knew by the time I saw the Elections Complaint Officer on the 20th of August 2007 that the Anne Widdecombe, who is a Grand Rank female Mason, had offered the safe Conservative seat of Maidstone to the Carlisle sisterhood. And basically after Anne Widdecombe came up to Carlisle on the 1st of April 2006, my life became the same as it had been in Maidstone. It was terrible. I had a horrible time up there, but I did meet some very nice people. Anyway, what happened after that? Well, they had in January 2008 in Maidstone, I was still up in Carlisle, they had a selection meeting to appoint Anne Widdecombe's successor. And I understand there were about 9 people to be selected there. Ian Hislop, as I recall, was from Private Eye, was on the selection panel. Well, of course, he knew about my medical scandal because I was in contact with his Dr. Medicine Balls about it, who'd sent me his book, Don't Trust Me, I'm a Doctor. So what happened next? Well, they had 9 candidates there, and who got selected? Well, the only one that got selected was a woman from Carlisle, Helen Grant. Well, I knew that was going to happen because I already knew that was going to happen. Well, recently, I'm in a social group, and I met somebody in my social group I was talking to and saying I'd like to give a talk about how Maidstone scandals are covered up. And the person said, yes, you can do that, March, April next year, that will be okay. And the person to the right of me said, has this got anything to do with our MP, Helen Grant? And I said, yes. And then she said to me, well, I was there when she was selected, it was rigged. First of all, that it had to only be a woman, and then only be Helen Grant. And then I explained to her how and why Helen Grant got selected to be Anne Widdecombe's successor, linked to the covering up of these scandals into the future that I've been talking about. The scandals involving the BMI and the 6.6 billion, and the scandals involving my ex-husband. So that's where we get to the situation where injunctions were used in Maidstone, and we didn't got an injunction despite the advice I was given. And an injunction's been used this year in the London Borough of Sutton to keep silent what was going on with Desmond Tutu's grandson. And then what happened to stop me standing against Helen Grant was I got sectioned. And whilst under section, I wrote a very detailed election complaint, which is, considering I was supposed to be so mentally ill, I had to be in a secure unit, I couldn't even go out to post a letter. The election complaint that I put together while I was supposed to be ill with a delusional disorder, which is the standard diagnosis for whistleblowers, e.g. Carol Woods, social worker. So that election petition I did while I was so ill is now in my election complaint bundle. And what I did while I was in the secure mental hospital in Crawley, I did write to Lord Newburger, who was Master of the Rolls at the time, because he had an inquiry going on into the use of super injunctions. So I wrote to him about what Anne Widdecombe had done, but nothing happened. And anyway, that's all part of my election complaint. And of course, what happened to this poor Desmond Tutu's grandson is that he too got sectioned. And I've got films showing what happened to him and his words saying what happened to him. As he says, he wasn't even seen by a psychiatrist when he was sectioned. And I've seen the paperwork saying it was the director of children's services that ordered him to be sectioned. And certainly the same was for me. I never saw a psychiatrist. I was sectioned on the order of my former solicitor, acting up as a judge in the car park of the Maidstone Magistrates, Maidstone Police Station. I was told that I know too much and I'm very intelligent, and therefore I was going to be sectioned. And that's basically what happened. And I'm now in a situation where I am complaining about that. And what I know, I believe the voters need to know. And that's why I'm making this film, to help the voters know what I know. that people don't want the voters to know. Right, well, as part of my election complaint, re Helen Grant, and in the anticipation that there would be a by-election, that my complaint would be successful, I held an event last Saturday night at the Maidstone Leisure Centre. But there were a lot of fun and games that happened around that event, which anybody seeing the video can actually appreciate some of it. But I actually believe that what was in that video should have been shown to all the voters in the Kent area, because it might have helped them with their decision in the referendum. Now, the person who filmed the event last week, I only knew as Dave. Somebody had referred him on to me, and I had him on my mobile as Video Dave. I didn't know who he was until he came down to the event. And he turned up, and when I was writing the cheque to him, I found out he was David Eden, and that he is a former police officer, had been involved in exposing corruption and paedophilia and other things in the past. Anyway, Dave left the event on Saturday night and said he was going straight back up to London. He was going to work through the night because he wanted that video out as soon as possible. Well, what happened? Well, he spent a lot of time getting the video ready, but somebody hacked his computers, and so we lost 24 hours. So in the end, that video didn't go up because that he was about to go to Brussels with Sabine McNeill and Belinda Mackenzie to meet some MEPs over child protection issues over here. And I think it's quite concerning that people have to go to Brussels to have discussions on a regular basis with MEPs in Europe about child protection issues that we can't sort out over here. I mean, as I say, I've got two cases, the Tutu case and Yolande Kenwards adoption case, but I can't get it in to the Supreme Court. I have the right to get it into the Supreme Court, but I can't get it in the Supreme Court because nobody will tell me how to get a certificate of the High Court. So basically, those people, David Eden, Sabine McNeill and Belinda Mackenzie, go to Brussels on a regular basis, and the Brussels people try and help with our child protection problems over here. That's one of the reasons I think we should remain in Europe. Until we start dealing with our own problems, we still need Europe. And that's why I think that we should stay in Europe. Due to the fact that David Eden was delayed in finishing the video work, even though he did it, the film work, he did it night and day, when we tried to get it up, it was going to take too long, and he was going to Brussels. And he wasn't due back until Friday night, and the other two ladies weren't back till Thursday night. When I was at the Royal Courts of Justice yesterday, I said that now that I've handed this renewed complaint back in, I will not be putting that video on the internet until a decision has been made about my election complaint. So that's where we are with that video. Meanwhile, during the week, I'm still recovering from my severe chest infection, pneumonia, but bullying of myself that's not helping my recovery continue. So I had some bullying on earlier in the week, and I tried to deal with it by writing letters to the leader of Kent County Council, the Prime Minister. I wrote letters saying that the referendum shouldn't go ahead because I have information that the voters need. They need to see my video. They need to know what I know. They need to know what's in my chronological history. And the referendum shouldn't go ahead for those reasons, because I believe that if people knew what I knew, things wouldn't happen. So my letters to the Prime Minister in the run-up to the referendum are also with the RCJ Elections Complaints Officer, and they also already form the bundle because they're already there. So I didn't have to take them up with me. They were already with the Elections Complaints Officer. So I'd already been saying before the referendum to the Electoral Commission, the Prime Minister and the head of Kent County Council, Paul Carter, that the referendum shouldn't go ahead while there's unresolved matter in Maidstone, the injunction in the London Borough of Sutton. The voters have the right to know all of the issues involved. Anyway, the next thing that happens is, on the back of the bullying, my health deteriorates, and I really start to feel quite unwell. I had in the previous few days started to have flashbacks back to 1980 when I was going to collect the data projector for the event last Saturday, and I was starting to get more flashbacks towards 1980 when I felt 1978-80 when I felt so unsafe in my own home with my violent, unstable husband, Nigel Peck. So I was quite upset on Wednesday night. So I was recommended to see my GP. A friend of mine texted me. Whoever's monitoring my phones certainly found out David Eden's identity from tracking him from my phone. And whoever's monitoring my phone certainly saw that I was I'd agreed with my friend that I was going to see my GP on Thursday morning. Since I first put my election petition into the Royal Courts of Justice Elections Officer on the 2nd of June, there was a threat to section me that day to stop me getting the file to him. But I have seen my GP, Dr. Jackie Gaston of the Orchard Medical Practice, twice since then. And yes, she I got sent to Maidstone Hospital for chest x-ray. Yes, I've got pneumonia, severe chest infection, and I'm due another x-ray in 4 or 5 weeks' time to see that it's, cleared. And she has seen me twice from the threat to section me on the 2nd of June that came from Kent Police while I was trying to get to the Royal Courts of Justice. But when I went up there on Thursday morning, I expected her to help me with the fact I wasn't really recovering very well from this pneumonia. So I went in there. I'd asked the week before, Monday last week, 10 days earlier, for my medical records. I wanted to see them for the first time since 2001. And she told me to write a letter, which I had. When I got to the surgery in Coxheath on Thursday morning, I checked with the woman behind the counter, and she said, yes, I've got your letter, I'm going to deal with it Friday and start giving you your medical records. I said, well, I'd like a couple of specific records from my medical records. She said, oh, that's okay. If it's only 1 or 2 specific records on specific dates, ask Dr. Gaston and she'll do that for you, and then I'll do the rest on Friday. I went in to see Dr. Gaston, and I started speaking to her about my, chest problems, my breathing problems with my pneumonia. And then I started asking her for the specific medical records of the 2nd of May 1980, as an example. And at that point, she said, I want you to see a psychiatrist today. You're mentally ill. I said, but I was fine. You've seen me. You've seen me on these other 2 dates. Oh, no, you weren't ill then, but you're mentally ill today. Well, I was really gobsmacked to know that I'd gone there with pneumonia, and that because I asked for a specific medical record she doesn't want to give me, I'm mentally ill. So I run out of the room, really upset, and I go to the counter and I'm saying, I'm deregistering. I don't want to have anything to do with this practice. I'm deregistering. Doctors protect doctors. Doctors protect doctors, I kept saying. And I was crying. And this very kind lady, who was a patient who'd watched me go in before I went in, as it turned out, came up to me and she put her arms around me and she started hugging me and she said, come with me. Meanwhile, there's other staff coming out of back rooms. Come and talk to us. No, I don't want to talk to you. I want nothing more to do with you. I've had enough. I'm deregistered. I've signed this now. I've written this note. I am deregistering now. I don't want to come back here again. I want my medical record for the 2nd of May 1980. And then I walked out with this woman, very kind lady, and she led me to her husband sitting in his car facing the entrance of the door. And she said, get in the car, my husband can help you. And he was a very nice man, and he did his best to help me. He told me that he was involved with the local health authority and also in educating GPs and whatever, and he was very, very helpful. Anyway, I left there. I texted Dave Eden, who was abroad, and he gave me the advice to leave Kent as quickly as possible, not use my mobile, not link into Wi-Fi, but wherever I go to an unknown hotel. So that is what I did on Thursday. I left Maidstone, went by train to London and stayed in a hotel in South Kensington. I then had a good night's sleep. It was great, having a good night's sleep. I met a guy called Jack Higgins, who was quite interesting to talk to. He was an American. And the next morning I went up to the Royal Courts of Justice, and that's where I took my file. I took photographs of it, and I met Adrian Taylor and his partner up there, and through him I met Judge Hill, who basically confirmed that Yoxall had been forced to go, and basically she was told why, and she was a very good judge. She was a very fair judge. Somebody had badly advised Mr. Taylor to go into that court. It was the wrong court. He'd been given bad advice, but that judge was good and she was fair, and she tried very, very hard to give him as much help as she possibly could. So I left there. Eventually I rang Kent Police and made a complaint that somebody had been trying to section me for all the wrong reasons, and they gave me a reference for that, which was, what was it? Oh, I can't remember at this stage. Anyway, it gave me a reference and I came back. I thought, okay, there's people resigning. It's not my problem anymore. The Duke of Kent's got the file. The head of New Scotland Yard's got the election file. They're sorting it out. It will be safe to come back to Kent. So I came back to Kent, came back to Maidstone, and then what happened? Late last night, I was asleep, and at about 11:15, bang, 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 ringing at the doorbell. Oh, who was it? Maidstone Police. Now, part of my complaint, re the referendum, is about immigration, because most people seem to vote to leave on the basis of immigration. But what I know about immigration has been going on in Kent, and also via the Tutu case, needs to be known by the public. I know that immigration into this country was avoidable if people had been doing things differently in Kent. The Channel Tunnel rail link was designed to facilitate asylum seeker trafficking, and I witnessed what was going on down at Junction 8 on the M20, and the last time I questioned anybody at Junction 8 down the M20 was when I stayed down there with Maureen Spallick in June 2008, and they were still telling me that the police were allowing immigrants to come in around there at that time. and I witnessed Royal Mail lorries standing on the hard shoulder there. So I've got no reason to think that it's not still happening if it was still going on in 2008. I also know what Michael Howard was doing when he was the Home Secretary with the port officials down at Folkestone and Dover to facilitate avoidable immigration. So, yes, I do believe that the voters, not only in Kent, but around the UK, need to hear what is on this video, and that the referendum needs to be done again in 6 weeks' time. For more information, please look at my Facebook, Yolande Kenward, Yolande, Kenward, Kenward. All of this stuff that's in my election petition is there on my wall. Thank you for listening, and I hope you found this film informative.